of 5. Like 5's I'm feeling great, 0's I've got nothing less. What are the numbers in the room? 2, 3. 5 is great? Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. Any other numbers? Energy levels? Yeah, wonderful. And our lovely panelists on the stage. Where are we starting from?
Energy level?
Yeah, 4. Love it.
I mean, I'm starting low, but I'm getting there, being here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, it's good. I think one thing that we want to do is there's so many different conversations and events and things happening, but it's hard to kind of have an intimate space where we can unpack what's at the heart of all of these issues, which is kind of like our lived day-to-day experience, our families, the traditions, our relationships with ourselves, each other, and nature that all come together when it comes to the topic of food, and how all of that can be a actual solution for the climate crisis and not always seen as a problem or at risk. There's many ways we can look at it. So we're gonna have a just free-flowing conversation around the topic of food, because I think today is Food and Agriculture Day here at the Climate COP. And ideally, it's not a conversation that is separated from our lived experiences, but really deeply rooted in our own aspirations, missions, what brings you to 5 every day that you're like, I'm full of energy and I really want to show up. Like, what is that for you? So my name is Selena Abraha. I will be just here holding space throughout this conversation. And we have 2 really lovely experts, thinkers, doers who can walk through their life experience, their understanding of how we should think about this issue and topic. So we have Amy on stage, who's a senior forestry officer and team leader at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. And we also have Sunday Geoffrey, who is the climate reality leader, co-coordinator of Support Humanity in Cameroon, and also a leader of a local chapter for the Global Landscapes Forum. Brilliant. Okay. So one thing I did want to get a sense of today is a quick snapshot of what do you eat every day? So I want to just see, raise your hand, do you have a coffee every day? Yes? No. Huh, tea? Tea, yeah? Maybe a juice? I'm trying to get a hand from this corner. Just water. Okay. I also want to get a sense of, please raise your hand if you've had chocolate in the past week. Nice, that's a unifier. Chocolate is a unifier. What about those who love rice? So like sushi, risotto, biryani. Brilliant. And yeah, I'm not a coffee lover either, but I just wanted to find the ways in which we're connecting with each other around food. So a quick fact around coffee, since that's a daily choice for all of us. It is one of the most popular agricultural products in the world, and 80% of coffee is produced by about 25 million smallholders. So there's so many people that we're connected to in that cup of coffee. And in this context, we're actually, with climate change, we expect to see a 50% reduction in the number of regions that can grow coffee by 2050. And often we use 2050 as a number, and it used to feel so far away. And I've been thinking about that these days, where it's like, it is not that net zero by 2050. It is pretty close. It is within our lifetime, and we're going to start seeing the impacts of that. We are now, but we're going to really feel that across the world soon. But before we get started diving into the different, ways in which our lives can be enhanced or, at risk through the future, I just want to get a sense of, for you, Amy and Sunday, what is the reason that you do what you do? And why is it, what brings you to I'm at a 5 and this is the work that I want to do, and how does that relate to food? Sunday, what inspires you to get up every day and do this work?
Yeah, what inspires me to do this work daily is my background, where I come from. I actually grew up in a rural community, and I was engaging with my parents, assisting my parents, and we're going to the farm daily. But then at one point, we had a lot of, when land started degrading within my community and we had the impact of climate change growing, we started witnessing crop failure in my community, and my father, who is a smallholder farmer, could not meet our family needs, and I had to stay out of school for 3 years. So when I had the opportunity, I had to give back to my community, and this inspires me every day, because I feel that because I stay out of school, no child deserves to stay out of school because of their lands are being degraded, or because of the impact of climate change, when we can actually take action. So what inspires me is take action continuously, to be resilient and to enable communities adapt so they can actually be able to continue living. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think for me, maybe it's a deep love of forests, actually. So I come from the forestry division at FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, as Selena said, and but I'm only there really recently. I've been there for about 3 years, and before that I was really involved in on-the-ground research in forested areas with forest-dependent communities. And what's been interesting about being at FAO is that, you know, there's so many different ways, so many different kinds of forests: boreal forests, temperate forests, mangrove forests, peatland forests, tropical broadleaf forests, dryland forests. And I think that has really, you know, and all the people and cultures that interact with those forests, including for their food security and basic nutritional needs. And so I think that is probably what inspires me the most, is really understanding that how much we need the world's forests and trees to sustain us in terms of food security, climate, and biodiversity goals.
Mm. So early Amy was like in love with the trees and walking through the
I was
forest.
a tree hugger.
Yeah.
I was, yes, I was. And actually my agricultural colleagues at FAO call me a tree hugger.
Yeah?
the crop and livestock people, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Any other tree huggers in the audience? No?
No.
Yeah, hey,
Okay.
reluctant. It's okay, you're in good company. I think it's really nice to talk about that. I found myself in the forestry sector for probably by accident. And in many ways, my parents were confused, like, why you hate being outside? Why are you studying, you know, the environment and taking these field trips and, you know, doing class in the rain? Because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest with lots of forests. But that origin story, once we start digging into it, it's much more rich and diverse than you think. But yet we arrive at the same place or have this like shared goal that we can all rally around. So it took me, I probably didn't start to care for biodiversity until like 4 years ago, you know, which, like, for someone who studies forests, it's like, isn't that inherent? Don't you just love all of it? And so it is, I think, recognizing the diverse ways that we end up coming to the table is an important part of also honoring a more broad narrative that can invite people. So I hope we can continue to kind of unpack our journeys to here, but also the ways that we can welcome everyone into the conversation. So one thing that I'm not sure everyone knows, but there is this narrative around, you know, we've got lovely forests, and they're all being cut down because we're eating, you know, beef, or because we're continuing to, you know, need to produce food. So it's always felt like there is this war and tension between having nature and you know, being able to actually produce food. Or similarly for energy, if you think about the African continent, it's always, okay, well, you know, we don't have energy, and so we need to cut down the trees, and this is the trade-offs that we're dealing with. But when we think about a vision where everyone's involved in kind of a more harmonious future, and you know, it feels like we have to start moving beyond that. So I just want to better understand, like, what are those trade-offs that you've seen, and how are you bringing in a new way of looking at this in the communities that you work in, or with the governments that you work with? What do you want to add to that can maybe make this a little more broad?
Yes, Selena, thank you for that question. You know, I work with communities, and I grew up in these communities. Sometimes they destroy the forest, but when you look critically, you see it's a question of survival. They have no other choice. They have no other solution. But before I go into that, I want to tell you, I grew up as a coffee farmer with my father for over 25 years, throughout my primary, secondary. But do you know, I only tasted coffee when I left my community. You produce coffee all your life, you have never tasted coffee because you don't process it. Everything is packaged and taken out of the community. And now, the way coffee is cultivated, for example, most of the farmers do not have access to education. They're not open to innovation. So what they know is they want to survive. They want to make money. They don't think about the environment. They don't think about the impact of the action on the environment. What they know is if we can deforest this area, we will be able to cultivate more coffee and make more money. But today I feel that with the challenges we are having, the global challenges we are having, we can change the narrative. We need to change the narrative. We need to educate the farmers. We need to provide more support. But when we take decisions on how cocoa, I think we have this challenge on, okay, you don't have to deforest to cultivate cocoa. We have to understand this is what these communities depend on. What is the alternative we are proposing to them? And that is why, for us as an organization, we are looking at alternative livelihood support. How do we help these communities, maybe to stop destroying the forest without impacting their livelihoods? What better alternatives can we have? So even coffee farmers will be motivated to cultivate coffee in a sustainable way. And I think building their capacity is very important. Providing financial support to them is also very important. And look at alternatives, like maybe integrating them in bee farming, for example, is very important. Integrating them also, engaging them also in maybe home gardening is also important. So they do not depend entirely on cultivating coffee or cultivating cocoa. Yeah. So this is the reflection we're having on providing solutions. Yeah.
I have so many questions, but I wonder, Amy, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I think just from this perspective, I mean, there's such a local perspective about these are land use decisions every day. And as you said at the beginning, in many cases, this is survival. And what farmers decide to do is to feed their families. And I think that's absolutely essential. And so to understand and ground us in before we, start, there is a call at the COP level in the COP decision text of last year for enhanced efforts to halt and reverse deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. So if you think 2050 is close, 2030 is like really, really close. Yeah. And so I think, that's an aspirational decision that everybody's behind, but we do need to understand what do farmers on the ground who are trying to feed their families really need to help make that happen. And so there's, sort of all the smallholder question of, really direct finance to local communities, smallholders, and indigenous peoples to help them make those kinds of transitions in a way that allows them to develop as well. And then there's also the question of the big producers, the big commodity producers, like the soybean farmers in Brazil, the oil palm producers, the cattle ranchers. And there's some really interesting new science coming out that's actually showing how important forests are for agricultural productivity, including in those frontier areas. So for example, in the Brazilian Amazon, in the state of Mato Grosso, it's a huge soy producing area, that actually in areas that have been deforested, the soy production is much lower than in areas where there is still some forest intact around those soybean fields because of the cooling benefits and rainfall regulation benefits that forests provide. So it's kind of like thinking about these farmers are not all the same, and you have like really different situations that we're dealing with, but understanding that to actually reach an aspirational goal of halting and reversing deforestation, a lot is needed in terms of incentives and understanding of why this is important, and support to help make that kind of transformation happen. Yeah.
And what I'm curious, what do those stories look like, where we're able to really show and illustrate it's better when we're able to, have the forest in some way kept around? Like, how do we actually bridge that with the realities that you're speaking about, Sunday, where it's like, this is about survival? So how are you working to try to shift that experience that you had as a kid, so that ideally that's not the life for many people in your country?
Yeah, so what we are doing is we have been having first organizing consultation meeting with these communities and organizing local dialogues, because we feel that we also really want to understand how the farmers think, how they feel about transitioning, how they feel about innovations, how can they innovate their farms. And we've identified some solutions, and we also try to provide capacity. And most importantly, we are targeting more women, because coffee farming is more of men, right? It's more of men leading. So we try to see that we give alternative support to women, provide capacity and engage them in cultivating maybe cassava, maybe in some cases cassava, in some cases they are doing home gardening. And we feel that we haven't really engaged actively in integrating maybe agroforestry practices within the coffee sector, because we don't have the capacity. But I think this can be a window, a solution, right? Maybe identifying which tree can be fully integrated within the system, which trees can provide maybe other economic benefits to these communities. But this is not something we've done yet. Yeah, but it's not something we've done. But within the discussions, these are some possible solutions that we are looking at.
And is there anything that surprised you when doing those local dialogues and around, how do they think? How are they thinking about innovation? What has come out from that? Has anything surprised you?
Yes, we have some farmers who really understand the impact of climate change on their activities, and who make us understand that they are actually witnessing degradation. So even the production of coffee is decreasing. So they understand that the land is degrading. Even catchment areas are also getting dry. So they themselves understand that there's need to change the farming system. But how do they go about this? This is the question that we haven't been able to answer. Yeah. And we haven't had support. At our own level, we haven't had support to provide, probably because of also we don't have the capacity. Yes, so, and I feel that if we can collaborate, if we can have access to capacity, we'll actually be able to lead this transition. I think the farmers themselves will be able to embrace it.
Yeah, I find often that there's it's not that there's really a lack of knowledge. There's actually tons of information out there. But then sometimes the organizations who are building that knowledge, that information, they don't necessarily have the trust of communities or the understanding of how do people think and what do they aspire for to bridge those two, places. And so in some ways, you seated next to each other feels like, a provider of this information, or Amy, you've, spent your time being able to think about how do I provide guidance as a scientist, and now with FAO working with countries. So I'm curious, how do you see your work intersecting with what Sunday's talking about?
Well, I think just, not forgetting that actually these farmers and local communities are really the focus of everything that we're doing. And I think, so when we're talking about even, policy change, and of course FAO works at the policy level, but it's not just for policy documents or policy, it's actually to better the lives of people in all around the world, in fact. And I mean, for FAO, it's committed to ending hunger, frankly, and supporting the livelihoods of local people and local farmers. And so I think that's sort of ensuring that these voices and these stories are always there and always, with the technocrats, the bureaucrats, sort of that the real stories are alive all the time. And whether that's happening at the national level, subnational level, or even in some of the global fora that an organization like FAO would organize, that these voices are really front and center. And I have to say, I've been pretty impressed by this World Food Forum, which has been happening for the past few years at FAO headquarters every year in October. And it's a youth-led forum, actually, and it's really all about sort of youth voices, women's voices, local voices, And it's just a very refreshing, so bringing those people into the FAO building for a week and really interacting with policymakers and bringing these kinds of stories to the ears. Because some of the most powerful things that I've seen are when government officials are sort of embracing local leaders and together coming forward and saying, this is something that we've constructed together. And that has happened. There are experience of that, and it's really beautiful when there can be that kind of breakthrough.
Yeah. Sunday, what does that success look like to you?
Come again?
What does success look like to you in terms of bridging that divide? Are you resonating with what some of Amy's sharing?
Yes, it's critical to bridge the divide. But like leadership is very critical, right? When we take decisions, sometimes we ask, like I work with the farmers, and sometimes I find myself in those decision-making places, and I ask myself, who informed these decisions? Because you understand that the decisions that are taken are cut off from the realities on the ground. You sit, you observe, but you cannot contribute. And the next day, the good policy has been adopted, but that policy does not serve the farmers. So I think Amy mentioned something that's very important. There's need for political leadership to support those working with those communities, to collaborate with those working with those communities, so that they can have the realities. They can actually have the reality on what is happening on the ground, and seek collaboration, right? And I know FAO work directly with the ministries. Like in Cameroon, I know they work directly with the ministries. They provide support directly to the ministries. But how much of those supports really get to those farmers? So you understand that the intention is to support the farmers. The policy is to support the farmers. They are not informed about the policy. They are not informed about the available resources. And at the end of the day, we have good documents that do not only serve the purpose within the office space. So I think that collaboration is very important. Collaboration is very important, but then we have to be very intentional. That what we want to do is to have a sustainable solution. We want to have a solution that works for everyone. I want to have a solution that works for the targeted population, the farmers that are being impacted, the farmers that need to bring the change. Because once you can't live, you can't afford your daily needs. Do you think you really care about the environment? You won't really care about the environment. So we have to be intentional about this to understand that the solutions we seek will come from somewhere. It will come from people who are most impacted. So giving direct support to them is very important. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that's very powerful. I keep thinking, and I always used to think of myself as an internal optimist, but the more I show up at the COPs, like the only thing I can think of is like, this is so broken. Like the system itself is just so broken. And we really do have to, like I know humanity is better, we are smarter than this. Like then, we've learned a lot with great intentions, but there has to be a better way of doing it, especially when you're pushed against a clock in a timeline, in a crisis, and real needs. And so I do sense that at some point we're gonna start to coalesce around, these new ways of operating or finding these windows where you can have that breakthrough moment and a policymaker can finally have that connection with those who are, well equipped to take that action forward and should be leading those solutions. So I'm sensing we don't have much time left, and we do have a really beautiful documentary we want to focus on experiencing together. So I guess my question to you both maybe is just what are your aspirations in terms of reimagining, and where are you seeing seeds of that emerge in the work that you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at the global level, one is really this narrative between forests and agriculture. I think really making sure that there is a very clear narrative that there are win-wins between forests and agriculture. And I think we have a huge opportunity with COP30 next year being in Brazil, where this is a country that was able to reduce deforestation while enhancing food security and agricultural production at the same time. They showed how this win-win can work. And I think also this, things have changed. It is slow, and it's really, I know it, and it is broken in many ways, but in some ways, there's been this huge breakthrough that we can really almost not talk about forest-based climate action without immediately talking about the key role of local communities, indigenous people, and smallholder farmers in that. And it's sort of it's said first and foremost, and then this call for direct access of finance to these communities is also right there in a way that it never has been. And so these are sort of small steps, and it probably should have happened a long time ago, but at least it's there, and I think now we need to make that narrative a reality so that people really feel the benefits of climate action on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I think irrespective of where we are now, I think there's hope. There's hope because we have solutions. There's hope because now we have technology. There's hope because now, I mean, countries are taking commitments. And I feel if these commitments are respected, if these commitments are channeled to, are respected and we re-strategize, like getting finances, for example, to communities in need, we can have sustainable solutions. So for me, I don't want to be pessimistic. I feel that I've committed to this work, and I know a lot of young persons are also committing to it. If they receive the right support, we'll have solutions. Yeah.
No, I love that. I'm just wondering if there's anyone in the audience, you have a question or a perspective that you want to share. Yeah.
From Patagonia.
Yeah.
You have a lot of forest and ice and things. And one issue that we are trying to work there is that in the developing model, exportation is an important issue. But the question is how you can be so agroecological to work with communities when almost a lot of public policies of our country are focused on exportation. And our country is named as agriculture and food big country. And we say that outside Chile we have 8 billion people. If you want to feed them, there's no country that can do that. If you try to do that, you have to use monocultives, you have to use chemicals, you have to make all the people working in that, and nature doesn't work in that. Or people that has them very boutique gadgets of ecological food, and they export to China completely. How can you be ecological if you are exporting to without footprint carbon going there? So how can you be have activities of sustainable food with the goal of exportation? And that's an issue very important because the international trade is part of the problem.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, and if you know about that?
Brilliant. Yeah, so just as, if you couldn't hear the question, it was really around the tension between an export-driven development model in many ways and the realities of agroecology, or just a healthier food system.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of one of the major issues that's needed to resolve, to transform agri-food systems to be more sustainable. And I think probably what FAO is trying to do is, sort of identify some of those areas like this and sort of, propose sort of different paths for food and agriculture production. I mean, there's no sort of one answer to that, but I think, these big agricultural countries, indeed, I mean, it's for domestic market, it's also for export, and it's a big part of the economy. And so this is not an easy problem to solve in any way. I think what we're trying to at least show that even with a lot of sort of this extensive agriculture is, if there's a way, sort of more of these integrated landscape approaches where sort of this less clearing of forests for new land and that then becomes degraded, and then that's actually sort of really trying to think of more of these integrated land use systems where there's sort of there's a bit more of a harmony between nature and food production. Not to say that it's easy. I mean, I think you highlighted the major challenge.
Sunday, do you want to comment? Given that coffee, I'm sure, was leaving the country, and how you see those aspirations come together.
I think it's in my country, the context may be different, but in my country, it's not just coffee that's leaving the country. Every year our president keeps reminding we have to consume local, but it looks like they value more what comes from out of the country. So we produce, we export, then we import. We import what we are not producing. So it's a complex situation, but I feel that if we have to, it is important that we have reflections on promoting local consumption, local production, local consumption. Because local consumption will need to come with processing. You need to come with the value chain, the entire value chain that will create employment for many young people. So I feel it's important that we have reflections around that. But that's where I think capacity is very important, because when you engage government officials, they tell we don't have the capacity to process. Like they cannot process coffee. And you ask yourself, is this serious? So they cannot process coffee, and people cannot drink coffee. So I'm privileged to be here and to drink coffee. When I get back to Cameroon, I can only drink coffee, imported coffee. You see how sad this is? Yeah, so, yeah.
No, thank you so much for that question. I want to leave time for us to really experience the documentary, and I want to share a bit about this. It's called The Invisible Corridor, Where Nature and People Grow. And it's part of the Global Landscapes Forum's New Vision for Earth Film Festival that is starting today with this in-person screening, but we'll have many more online in the next month. So it features 6 young restoration professionals from Latin America who meet for the first time in Colombia. And over 5 days, they get to immerse themselves in mountain communities, learn from the conservation initiatives, but also share, insights and experiences with each other. So we'll get to unpack how restoration can flourish despite challenges around land rights, which we didn't touch on, around gender and livelihoods across the region. So from El Salvador to Argentina, these young experts in the communities that they visit in Colombia will start to unpack what that nature and people relationship looks like in Latin America. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you for providing your insights, and let's see where this goes. Thank you, everyone. Selena.
Thank you.
Una bióloga de profesión incluye la siembra de especies autóctonas.
Le han tenido mucha devoción por la particularidad que tiene.
Soy ecólogo, Soy ecólogo, años y soy de Colombia. Tengo 32 años y soy de Colombia. Soy apasionado por el tema de la restauración ecológica. Soy apasionado por el tema de la restauración ecológica. Ya vengo trabajando desde hace 10 años. Soy
bióloga, ecóloga. El ecosistema que estoy restaurando es el bosque de espinal, es un bosque xerófilo seco en las zonas de llanuras de Córdoba.
Soy colombiano. Soy ecólogo de profesión. Soy ecólogo de profesión. Un ecosistema que es de alta montaña, que es clave en la regulación hídrica, que es clave en la regulación del clima también.
Tengo 27 años, soy bióloga de El Salvador y trabajo con restauración de ecosistemas enfocado en las comunidades participativas.
Soy ingeniero en gestión ambiental y me dedico al desarrollo de proyectos, la gestión de proyectos para el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible.
Soy de Lambayeque, del norte de Perú, y soy bachiller en ingeniería química. Fusionamos tanto restauración como conservación de polinizadores.
Entre 2017 a 2019, la Asociación Selva realizó unos inventarios de las poblaciones de 2 especies de aves, la caminera tolimense y el atlapetes de anteojos, y posteriormente priorizó unas áreas para hacer actividades de restauración y conservación. En la actualidad, el proyecto se encuentra conformado por Lady Arango y un grupo de productores rurales de las regiones y los municipios de Líbano, Villahermosa y Murillo.
Claro, porque el teléfono...
Tiene que haber una motivación para que los propietarios de predios cedan espacios para conservar o restaurar. Entonces, yo creo que el caso de las aves es un bonito ejemplo porque a todos les gusta y les llama la atención. La idea es tener fragmentos de hábitats lo suficientemente conectados que permita la movilidad entre especies. En este caso eran la paloma y el atlapetes, y para eso pues también se hicieron estudios de cuáles eran las especies de vegetales, que esas especies con las que anidaban o se alimentaban. También interactúan con los diferentes sistemas productivos que hay. El bosque seco, digamos, está relacionado con maíz, arroz, algodón. El bosque subandino, pues toda la zona de café. El bosque andino ya tiene pues ganadería, frutales, aguacate, y el páramo pues es toda la papa, y también hay muchos de esos productos que son nativos de América.
En el año 2020, iniciando el año antes de la pandemia.
Una herramienta fundamental en esta región es el ecoturismo. El ecoturismo basado en el avistamiento de aves, la apreciación del paisaje, la interpretación ecosistémica nos ha dado como una opción más, un ingreso más, incentivos para poder decirle a todas las personas incluidas y motivar cada día más y más finqueros. Si cuidamos ese hábitat de 2 especies, podemos multiplicar a poder tener un hábitat muy clave para 450 especies de aves, que son las que hemos llegado a tener en inventarios, que aquí hay fincas que tienen relictos de bosque y las personas quieren conservarlo, ¿sí? Y otras personas dicen, yo realmente quiero que toda mi finca sea un bosque. O sea que ya haríamos un proceso completamente pensado en restauración. Por el otro lado está el finquero o la finquera que realmente dice, bueno, yo quiero un bosque, pero yo también quiero cultivar. Entonces ahí hablaríamos de la rehabilitación. Entonces es mirar qué quieres, qué necesitas y cómo se puede hacer, ¿cierto? Qué elementos tenemos y qué herramientas podemos usar.
Hemos venido conversando con muchos amigos acerca de la necesidad de darle un sentido ambiental a todas las prácticas agropecuarias, sociales, culturales y humanas del territorio. Fuimos aliando con otras instituciones, por ejemplo con la Asociación Selva, con quien hicimos unos corredores biológicos. Hicimos además con otras entidades apoyo recíproco, restauración de áreas, y empezamos a diseñar proyectos ecoturísticos, de avistamiento, bueno, de otra serie de actividades. Y eso nos fue conjugando cada vez más y haciendo pensar el territorio de una manera más interesante. Nosotros decimos la única posibilidad real de pensar en sostenibilidad a mediano y largo plazo es dando sostenibilidad social. Es decir, construyendo ciudadanía, medio ambiente y sociedad.
El proyecto inicialmente impacta a los productores dueños de sus predios, que son los que tienen la intención y esa motivación por restaurar o conservar. Y ahí cuando inicia ese proceso, termina impactando a más personas dentro del paisaje. Entonces a los vecinos que terminan beneficiándose de la conservación del recurso hídrico, de la recuperación del suelo que nos está degradando.
Pero no sé, en los sistemas que yo trabajo, que son de años de disturbios, depende de dónde saquemos los panes de tierra,
claro,
ahí tienen más o menos riqueza de
no, es
semillas.
súper importante lo que tú dices, porque acá está muy marcada la zonificación de banco de semilla.
Como reserva natural, gracias al proyecto todo que hemos tenido con los diferentes actores, con los guardianes de restauración, con el Global Gap, entonces hemos podido desde nuestro predio pues salvaguardar ese corredor. Acá, de todas maneras vivimos de un método, una cultura de uso del suelo muy tradicional, donde se aplica mucho veneno, donde se quema bastante, donde está la cultura de tumbar bosques para sembrar. Entonces hay un primer reto que es a través de nivel de conciencia ambiental para que la gente primero sepa qué restaurar. Tenemos otro segundo reto, es que no tenemos conocimientos tecnificados en cuanto al proceso de vivero de especies nativas, no tenemos un vivero municipal. Entonces básicamente queremos eso, enfocarnos en lo que es el turismo de naturaleza, turismo de conservación, pero enlazando todos estos componentes de educación, de conservación y de turismo y de investigación.
Me parece muy didáctico, muy fácil de llegar a los estudiantes con proyectos tangibles como lo es la reserva, digamos, conteo de árboles, conteo de aves, la distribución de las aves, y pues obviamente es un proyecto transversal, interdisciplinario, donde mezclo las matemáticas con la biodiversidad, con la fauna, con la flora, con todo lo que la envuelve, con todo lo que lo rodea. Nosotros siempre hemos querido como apoyar a mujeres que tengan cierta vulnerabilidad, como son madres cabezas de hogar. Lastimosamente este pueblo tiene como unos índices de pobreza demasiado altos, que a veces vienen vecinos, ay, usted tiene pronto limoncillo que es que sirve para la fiebre y tengo una niña enferma, entonces también ese tipo de pronto no generan una retribución económica como tal, un valor, pero pues sí tenemos como un tejido social alrededor de esos cultivos.
Y había un potrero donde no había agua. Entonces, ya con las experiencias pasadas, conseguí un semillero de guadua y lo sembré en una parte donde yo intuía de que había agua subterránea. Y a los 6 meses de haber aislado del pisoteo y de que la gente pasara por ahí, nació agua. Y comenzó a aumentar, y eso hace más de 15 años. Y ese conocimiento yo también lo impartía cuando yo trabajaba en el hospital como técnico en saneamiento, se lo impartía a la comunidad. También me ha enamorado la existencia de algunas especies de aves que no habían en Villahermosa hace 15 años, pero desde que se le ha dejado crecer el monte nativo, mire que regresaron de nuevo al municipio.
Pueden probarla. Pueden probarla. Yo hago salsitas de estas moras, mora silvestre.
aquí en...
Bueno, muchachos, ustedes están de buenas, me ayuda a agarrar de aquí el horario.
Ok. ¿Quieres que lo sostenga yo y tú indicas, no?
Bueno, muchachos, miren la hermosura. Ahorita si usted, esto es lo que cualquier apiario quiere ver.
Espérate, voy a bajar las abejas porque va a estar la reina ahí.
Bueno, los procesos de restauración, la verdad, no han sido fáciles porque, pues, empezando que aquí hay una mina cerca, entonces, pues, la gente es muy reacia a este tipo de restauraciones. Sin embargo, pues, la finca son 28 hectáreas, de la cual, pues, todo está siendo destinado a la restauración. Yo le estoy creando conciencia de que la gente venga y siembre un árbol con la intención de que, pues, necesitamos ese oxígeno y agua. La intención es de seguir fortaleciendo el ecosistema y más que estamos en la mitad de la cordillera central de los Andes colombianos. Un día por accidente nos atacaron unas abejas en la finca, unas abejas africanizadas, y pues de ahí nació la idea, dije no, pues de aquí hay que sacar miel. Ya viendo la importancia de lo que son los insectos como las abejas como polinizadores, pues nació la idea de seguir sembrando árboles, entonces pues ahí vamos, pues sacándole provecho a la tierra sin necesidad de estar dañando el medio ambiente y el ecosistema.
Trabajaba en un vivero, entonces ahí me conocí con el ingeniero Sergio en ese entonces, y pues me plantearon que para trabajar con él, y la verdad me gustó mucho. Lo uno porque es algo que a mí me gusta, segundo porque pues también la parte económica, y también hubo trabajo para mis hijos, en ese entonces que también ingresaron a la parte, entonces tuvimos trabajo digamos que 3 años seguidos con él, y fue algo muy maravilloso, muy bonito, y hoy pues todavía estoy acá toda pendiente de esos arbolitos. El mantenimiento de los árboles que se plantan son necesarios, ¿por qué? Porque eso sucede como cuando hay un niño pequeño, si nosotros lo dejamos solito, pues obviamente que él va a morir, o sea, perece. Entonces un árbol no solamente es sembrarlo, sino que toca hacerle un mantenimiento, un procedimiento, un seguimiento. Me ha gustado mucho la reforestación porque es una forma de volverle como vida al planeta, de volver a que el agua vuelva otra vez a resurgir otra vez, entonces es algo para los futuros, para nuestros hijos.
Ahí mi abuelo ponía un escritorio y era una fila de trabajadores cobrando el jornal, eran muchísimos los trabajadores que habían. Viene la violencia, también toca, digamos que irse de aquí, dejar del campo abandonado. Entonces pues realmente aquellos cultivos grandísimos de café se acaban y en un enero, aquí estando viendo cómo organizábamos el techo, se nos ocurrió ponerlo turístico y empezamos ya como con la parte turística a venirnos para acá. El monocultivo creo que no es bueno de por sí. Entonces me parece, pongamos en este momento, quiero sembrar un pedazo que tengo de caña en la parte de arriba de la carreterita, es sembrarla en plátano. Entonces tener plátano, tener caña, tener café. Los guamos se cultivan, los cultivan mucho en el café porque son árboles muy altos, lo mismo que el aguacate antiguo, ¿no? Entonces hay momentos en que le da sombra al árbol, pero no todo el tiempo. Entonces eso hace que el grano de café sea mejor. Lo que fueron árboles nunca se cortaron, únicamente el monte. En la parte de abajo va a haber un pedazo donde va a ser un lotecito de cítricos. El café verde, ya el café un poco maduro.
En esta región yo creo que ahorita el reto más grande es como saber conseguir recursos para restaurar.
Si es posible generar ingresos haciendo un uso sostenible de nuestros recursos de diferentes formas, ¿no? Desde el turismo, aprovechando por ejemplo, las semillas de algunos árboles que se utilizan para hacer bisutería o que otros árboles cuyas semillas se utilizan para usarlos como detergente natural, ¿no? Como el choloque. Es importante demostrarle a los pobladores que es posible conservar los bosques y a la vez usarlos, pero de manera sostenible. Y bueno, actividades como la apicultura y la meliponicultura son actividades que lo demuestran tal cual.
Para apoyar a las mujeres y tener un impacto real en las comunidades, se debe primero considerar que hay que tener un fondo, una paga justa para esto. Porque a veces se habla que como este tipo de acciones es algo que deben hacer, que es algo que nosotros tenemos amor por la naturaleza, no debe ser bien remunerado. Todo se tiene que pensar también para que obviamente debe haber algo que pueda ayudarme a sostenerme y a sostener a mi familia. Entonces, sí considero que deben empezar a hacerse proyectos, implementarse proyectos que les traiga también una remuneración a las personas, a las mujeres locales.
Las comunidades muchas veces tienen más conocimiento que el propio técnico en restauración o el propio ecólogo o biólogo. No, necesitamos es que las comunidades se vean full inmersas en el trabajo y no como actores externos a este trabajo, porque si ellos no sienten ese tipo de incentivos, si ellos no se sienten representados en el trabajo, vamos a seguir fracasando en la restauración y en la conservación de nuestros ecosistemas. El reto está en cómo nos complementamos como las comunidades, los ayudamos a desarrollar sus procesos de una manera mucho más eficiente. Realmente son las comunidades las que hacen que esto tenga sentido. Sin las comunidades no va a suceder la restauración, y si no pensamos en las comunidades y trabajar con las comunidades, no vamos a poder restaurar nuestro país.
Las mascotas también son igual.
Al final la restauración se basa mucho en ver qué hace el ecosistema nativo, el ecosistema de referencia, y quiénes son los que realmente pueden conocer ese ecosistema de referencia. Pues son las comunidades indígenas o las personas locales, ¿no? Yo creo que es claro que los conocimientos indígenas han sido lo suficientemente resilientes, que les ha permitido, después de un sistema tan capitalista, tan colonizador, persistir y resistir aún en estos tiempos, y organizar sus comunidades, seguir creciendo y seguirse adaptando a los diferentes desafíos, ¿no?, que pueden haber. Entonces creería yo que los conocimientos, más que un beneficio, deben ser como una guía de cierta forma, y obviamente esa guía respetando la autodeterminación de los pueblos indígenas.
Involucrar a las mujeres en el trabajo de su tierra es la primera forma de que puedan sentirse parte primero y empezar a tomar confianza para poder expresar lo que ellas sienten, expresar lo que saben y poder comenzar a trabajar en conjunto en esos proyectos de conservación o de restauración. Yo creo que todos los trabajos con la tierra en general han sido un poco el terreno de trabajo de hombres siempre. Por eso siento que es disruptivo y que es súper bueno que las mujeres estemos tomando esos espacios también.
La inmigración, por ejemplo, que es uno de los principales motivos del por qué los hombres tienen que emigrar para traer más dinero a sus familias. Entonces las mujeres se quedan solas cumpliendo las acciones de cuidado, que es el rol de la mujer en Latinoamérica, y cumpliendo también el rol de sostener a una familia, trabajar la tierra, traer todo el dinero. Las mujeres son las que son más afectadas por estas mismas razones, por el cambio climático. Es difícil el acceso a los recursos, es difícil el acceso al agua, es difícil el acceso a muchos derechos, etc. Entonces, empoderar a las mujeres para acciones por el clima, acciones por la biodiversidad, considero yo que es lo fundamental para poder hacer crecer una sociedad.
Y la comunidad es uno de esos principales elementos para el éxito de la restauración. No hay que llegar en ningún momento a imponer o a decir aquí vamos a plantar X cantidad de árbol a esta distancia o con conceptos técnicos que solamente para los ingenieros o en la universidad hace sentido, sino es dedicarle ese tiempo de escucha al campesino. Quiero a futuro que los productores, los participantes del proyecto se empoderen de las acciones que se han venido realizando. Quiero que exista una comunicación más efectiva entre ellos y que generen una sostenibilidad, no solamente en la parte ambiental, sino que con las acciones que promuevan la economía de los municipios.
Limpiar varias. Es muy importante restaurar los valores de la sociedad, por lo que he comentado de que no sabemos lo que tenemos, no lo conocemos, y porque no lo conocemos no lo podemos valorar. Pero sí podemos hacer una agricultura más sustentable y más amable con el ambiente, y que a la vez los beneficios de los sistemas naturales potencien la producción de alimentos y las actividades productivas. Entonces, creo que es simplemente una cuestión de diseño.
Y los árboles también.
Si las personas aprenden cómo interpretar el ecosistema, aprenden cómo trabajar en las tierras, cómo cuidarlo, cómo respetar la biodiversidad, cómo conectar, eso va a ser una práctica que puede empezar a implementarse de generación en generación, que es lo que necesitamos. Las personas que trabajamos por el medio ambiente debemos también conocer sobre las leyes o conocer cómo podemos incidir en esto, y así poder llegar a ser o tomadores de decisiones o acompañar a los tomadores de decisiones para que tengan en cuenta siempre todo lo que los conocimientos que nosotros tenemos.
Yo siempre he pensado que el Estado es clave para que todo proceso sea mucho más eficiente y eficaz. Necesitamos un Estado consciente que escuche a los técnicos y que realmente se tome las manos y actúe por estos ecosistemas de los cuales todos dependemos.
No hay una legislación que proteja nuestros bosques, que proteja los árboles que tenemos, a los bosques nativos, y se sigue talando de manera excesiva. Al menos en el norte se ha talado mucho y se sigue talando. Esto está conllevando a que perdamos biodiversidad, porque no solo se pierden bosques, se pierde todas las especies que están dentro del bosque, ¿no? Y seguramente muchas especies endémicas que solo están en un solo lugar.
La restauración puede ser una herramienta para atender diferentes desafíos que estamos enfrentando como sociedad y ser básicamente una solución basada en la naturaleza integral que permita tanto mejorar las condiciones ambientales, sociales y económicas de comunidades vulnerabilizadas.
Y que hay que ser optimistas, que los cambios se pueden siempre y cuando trabajemos entre todos. Y tenemos un común denominador, y se llama naturaleza, se llama apreciación de los paisajes, se llama conciencia. O sea, la verdad son varios comunes, pero de eso se trata, el trabajo en comunidad.